This video will teach you how to develop a simple online account system in GameMaker. We're going to create a demo in which users can create an account, log in, and retrieve their data. The benefits of this system are that you can easily store data about users, such as their score, in order to create an online Highscore table. Users don't need to log into an account like Google, Facebook, or Steam, and all the data is controlled by you in an easy to view and edit JSON format. The downsides of this system are that there's a limit to how much data you can store for free, and you have minimal ability to implement security measures, which means you have to be really careful about what user data you can store. With that said, you can definitely use the backbone of this system to implement a simple Highscore table which is suitable for a jam game. You can also build on this video's lessons to develop a more secure system if you want. So the backend to this system is hosted by JSON Bin, which provides 10,000 requests for free. What this means is that you won't have to pay anything until after your game is played 10,000 times, which should be enough for small projects. Start by going to jasonbin.io and click Create Account. Here, enter your email, password, name, and click Create Account. Alternatively, log in with Google, GitHub, Facebook, or Twitter if you prefer. You'll have to verify your email, but once you've done that, you can click Login, enter your email and password, and click Continue. Then you'll be taken to the dashboard. Here you can see that you have 10,000 pending requests. This number will go down as you make requests to JSON Bin. The first step is to go to API Keys and click Create Access Key. Then you can give your access key a name like Player and select Read and Update. This means that your player will be able to read and write data, but not create or delete entire collections of data. Now click Save Access Key and a long string will appear underneath X access key. Now go to Bins and click Create a Bin. A bin is just a collection of data, and since our data structure is going to be very simple, we only need one bin. In this Create a Bin section, we can start to define the format of our data. JSON data is formatted very much like structs in GameMaker. So start by entering a pair of square brackets, and inside add a pair of curly braces. This is basically an array with a struct inside of it. Then inside the curly braces, write username inside a pair of speech marks followed by a colon. Then write admin inside a pair of speech marks followed by a comma. On the next line, do the same thing but change username to password. Then on the line after that, write score in a pair of speech marks followed by a colon, and just type the number 0 after that. What we've done is effectively created our first user. This user's username and password are both admin and their score is 0. Now click on Save Bin and you'll see the bin ID appear on the left. Make a note of the access key we created before, as well as the bin ID that just appeared, and load up GameMaker. All you need to do in GameMaker at first is create an object and a room, and then place the object in the room. The only thing I'll note is that I'm making the room 1024 by 576 so that it's big enough to display our Highscore table. Now open the object you created and add a create event. The first thing to add here is some information about the state of the object. If you already know about finite state machines, this concept will make sense to you, but if you haven't heard of state machines, the basic concept is that we'll have a variable called state, which stores what we're currently doing, and then we'll run certain code based on our state. The simple way to do this is to create an enum. An enum is basically a short list of values, and they're useful in cases like this, where the list of values we'll want to set the variable states to is known, and it's helpful to be able to label them. So all we have to do is write enum data states, and then put a pair of curly braces. Inside those curly braces, write out the following values with a comma after all but the last. Loading, choose, login, username, password, login test, and access. The convention is that enum members, everything inside the curly braces, should be capitalized because they're constants, which means that we won't be changing their values. Finally, just write state equals datastates.loading so that we start in our loading state. Next, we're going to initialize some variables related to the HTTP request we're going to be making to the JSON Bin API, and then we'll make the request. Start by initializing two variables, bin ID and access key, which will be strings. Go to JSON Bin and copy the values that I pointed out earlier, and then paste them into GameMaker inside of the speech marks. Then initialize a variable called URL, which will be the URL to which we'll make our request. I'll put this link in the description so you can just copy and paste it. And then to the end of this, we'll also need to append the bin ID. Next, we need to initialize our HTTP headers. A header is just a data field of our request containing some metadata. We'll need to start by using the function dsmap_create to create a dsmap and store it in the local variable headers. Then we can use the function dsmap_add and pass as arguments the local variables headers, the string x-access-key, and the variable access key. Then initialize a variable called request, within which we'll store the ID of the request, which will be sent off by the function http request. Inside of that function, we'll pass the arguments URL variable, the string get in all capitals, and the local variable headers, as well as an empty string. Now, because we're finished with the dsmap, just use the function dsmap_destroy and pass in the local variable headers as the argument to destroy it. Data structures always need to be destroyed once they're not in use in GameMaker, otherwise you'll get a memory leak. The last set of variables we need to initialize in this create event relate to our login. First, initialize a variable called array, which will be undefined to start. This will eventually contain an array of all the users' names, passwords, and scores. Then create a variable called username and a variable called password, which will both be empty strings, but these will soon store our username and password. Finally, create a pair of variables called login and login type. Login will be -1 if we're logged out, otherwise it will store our position in the Highscore table. Login type will be 0 if we're logging into an existing account, or 1 if we're creating a new account. Next, I want you to create an async HTTP event. This will handle the response from our request for the data. The first thing we need to do here is to check if this event was triggered by our file request. To do this, we can access a dsmap which this event generates called async load and find the ID value. If it's equal to the contents of the request variable, then we can proceed. Inside this if statement, we can also get the status value from the dsmap, and if it's equal to 0, which would mean that the request was a success, then we can proceed again. So if both of those if statements were true, we can get the result from that dsmap, which will be the JSON file stored at JSON bin in the form of a string. Then we can use that function JSON parse, which will turn that string into a struct. Next, set our array variable to the record variable stored within the result. The record variable represents the array we wrote in JSON bin earlier. The last thing to do here is to write a sorting function to sort the Highscore table. All we have to do is return user B's score minus user A's score, which will always put the highest score on top. Then use the function array_sort and pass the array variable and the sorting function as arguments. Finally, set the state of the object to datastates.choose, which is where we'll ask the player whether they want to log in or register. Now we can create a step event. Here we'll run certain code depending on what state we're currently in. To do this, we'll write a switch statement and then put a pair of curly braces. Inside the curly braces, write case datastates.choose followed by a colon. Then on the next line, write break. This code means that only the code which is between the colon and the word break will run when the state variable is equal to datastates.choose. You can copy this section of code and paste it 4 times. Then in the copies, change the word choose to login, password, login test, and access. So since the choose state is where we determine if we want to log in to an existing account or register a new account, we're going to use the enter key to proceed to the login screen and the escape key to proceed to the register screen. In our code, these will both be the same state because the code for accepting a username and a password will be the same for logging in and registering. All you have to do is write if keyboard check pressed vk enter or keyboard check pressed vk escape and then add a pair of curly braces. Inside, type login type equals keyboard underscore last key equals vk enter $0:1. This line says if the last key we pressed was enter, set login type to 0, otherwise set it to 1. Next, we set the variable keyboard string to an empty string. The variable keyboard string holds whatever the user is typing, and so we want to get rid of anything they typed before we go to the username entry screen. Finally, we can set the state to datastates.username. In the username state, we want to set the username to keyboard_string. This means that whatever the user types will become their username. Then we check if the enter key was pressed, and if so, we again reset keyboard string and move to the password state. We also want to check if the escape key was pressed, which will allow the user to cancel their login, and it will return them to the choose state. In the password state, we'll do the exact same, but set the password variable to keyboard string and move the user to the user test state if they press enter. The user test state is where we'll check if the username and password entered exist in the database. If we're logging in, we expect that the username and password do exist, but if they don't, then the player has either not registered or entered their details incorrectly. If we're registering and the username already exists, then we shouldn't allow the user to be registered. To do this, we'll start by creating a local variable called match, which we'll set to -1, and a local variable called len, which will be the length of the array called array. Then we'll use a for loop to iterate through the array. Inside here, initialize a local variable called user, which we'll set to the user at position I in the array. Then, if the string the user entered in the variable username is equal to the username of the current user, then we can set the match variable to the position of the current user. However, if login type is 0, which means that we're logging in and the passwords are not the same, we'll set the match to -1 again. This means that for registering, a match only has to occur for usernames, but for logins, a match has to occur for both usernames and passwords. Next, we'll process this match variable. If it's equal to -1, then there's been no match. Inside this if statement, add another which checks if login type is 0. The code here will run when there's no match and we're logging in, so what we want to do is send the user back to the username entry screen. First, we should reset keyboard string to an empty string before second, setting the state to datastate.username. Now we can add an if statement which will be if login state is equal to 1, i.e. we're registering. In this case though, the fact that there was no match is actually good, as it means that the username hasn't already been used. So what we need to do is make another HTTP request which will send the data to JSON bin. Start by making a DS map and storing it in the local variable headers. Then to the DS map, we have to add the string application/JSON as the content type and the variable access key as the X-access key. It's important that you type everything as I've typed it here. Then we want to push a new struct to our array. This represents us adding a new user. The struct will contain the username, password, and score variables. Username and password will be set to the existing variables with the same names, and the score will, for the purposes of this demo, be set to a random whole number between 0 and 100. After this, we should again sort the array, so you can just copy and paste these lines from the async HTTP event. Next, we can use the function JSON_stringify to turn our array into a valid JSON string. We can use the HTTP request function, passing in the URL variable, the string put in capitals, the headers local variable, and the data local variable as arguments, and this will send the data back to JSON bin. Finally, we have to destroy the DS map and then set the state back to datastates.choose so that the user can decide to either log in to the account they just created or register a new one. Before we can move on to the last state, we just have to handle what happens if match was not equal to -1. So add an else statement, and you want to again check if login type is equal to 0. If it is, then set the login variable to the match variable, and this will tell us which user we are. Then you can set the state to the access state. If login type is not equal to 0, then we're registering, and the fact that there is a match is bad, so we want to clear keyboard string and set the state back to the username state. The last state we need to handle is the access state. All that will happen here is that the user can choose to log out, so if the escape key is pressed, just return them to the choose state. That's all for the step event, so the last event you need is the draw event. Inside the draw event, start by setting the draw color to white. We're going to highlight our name in the Highscore table in green, so it's important that we reset the color to white. Below, you can make a switch statement which will look the same as the one in the step event with the same cases, but with the addition of a loading state and the exclusion of the user test state. I'm going to start with the username state just because you can copy this code to the other states as well. Start by drawing some text at position 1616, and the text will be a right arrow, username, plus the username variable. Make sure that the part of the text before the plus is inside speech marks. Then at position 1648, draw the text password : at position 1680, draw the text, press enter to proceed, and at position 16112, draw the text, press escape to exit. You can copy this over to the password state and just move the right arrow to the password line. For the loading state, just draw the text loading ... at position 1616, and for the choose state, draw the text, press enter to log in, or press escape to register ... at position 1616 as well. In the access state, create a local variable called user. Inside this, we'll store the details of the user which we're logged into. These can then be retrieved from the array called array at the position we stored in the login variable. Then, at Y positions 16, 48 and 80, we can draw our username, password and score. At Y position 112, draw the text, press escape to log out. Then, to draw our Highscore table, we'll iterate through the array and draw everyone's username and score. To start, create a local variable called len and set it to the length of the array. Then use a for loop to iterate through the array. Inside the for loop, start by checking if I is equal to the login variable. If it is, then we're drawing the user we're logged into, so you should set the draw color to lime. Otherwise, set the draw color to white. Next, store the user at position I in a local variable called u. Then, create a local variable called text and set it to u.username plus a hyphen in speech marks plus u.score inside the string function to convert the number into a string. Then you can draw that text at x position 16 and y position 176 plus 32 multiplied by I, and this will draw each user on a different line. Finally, we can press F5 or the run button to test our demo. A black window will pop up with the text, press enter to log in or press escape to register. We can press enter to log in to the account we just made when we set up JSON Bin. If you remember, the username and password were both admin and the score was 0. So press enter, write the username, press enter again and write the password, and then you'll be taken to the access screen. At the top, you can see the username, password and the score, and just below you can see the Highscore table. Right now there's only one entry, but let's press escape to log out and we'll create a new user. Press escape again to go to the registration screen, and this time come up with a new username and password. If you try and enter the username admin, which has already been used, the registration will fail and you'll be prompted to give a new username and password. Once you've logged in though, you'll see your new details at the top, as well as the Highscore list with your name highlighted in green. Because your score is higher than the admin's score, it's at the top. So let's create another user, and that will let us truly test whether the scores are getting sorted correctly. Now you can see that everything is getting sorted and displayed correctly, so let's just open up JSON Bin in our browser to make sure that the data got uploaded okay. Go to the bins page, or if you're already there, hit refresh and click on the bin. Then on the right hand side, you should see the 3 users we created with their usernames, passwords and scores. So I think that just about brings us to the end of our video. Remember that this is just a jumping off point for you to use the lessons from this video in a lot of different ways. As you can imagine, there's some security risk with storing lots of passwords in an easy to read JSON file. So if you are going to use this system, consider advising players to create a new password instead of using an existing one. Alternatively, you can look into some kind of encryption system so that no one has access to the passwords in plain text. However, in the past, I've made a video for the official GameMaker channel which explains how to make what is in essence the same demo I made in this video. The difference is, that video used Firebase, which is a more powerful and secure system, but one which is a bit more difficult to use. This system and the Firebase system both have advantages and disadvantages, but it's always good to have another tool at your disposal. With all that said, I hope you leave this video with a good understanding of how you can make a graphical user interface with text input and how you can store JSON data in the cloud. If there's something I could have explained better, please leave a comment. I hope this video will be useful for any of your future game projects. Please like and subscribe and click the bell to get notified about all my future videos.